What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the CompileSwift podcast. I'm your host, Peter Whittam. You can find this podcast at compileswift.com/podcast. In this episode, yes, it's the Apple October event, and we finally got machines worthy of developers, I think. So finally, some love. We're going to go ahead and get into the details here because there's a lot to talk about, and it's all good news for once, I think. I'm happy to say it's all good news. So, yes, we got MacBook Pros. Okay, before that, they spoke about some new crazy voice plans, Siri music thing, whatever. That just sounded ridiculous and pointless. So we'll just skip over that. Now, MacBook Pros, let's talk machines. Firstly, the new designs for the 14-inch and the 16-inch MacBook Pros look somewhat like the old machines as far as the external. They have that nice sort of beveled edge on the corners, which I love. So well done on that, Apple. We've got some nice looking exteriors for once. And yes, the machines have a notch. And I know that sounds a bit weird, but it was inevitable, right? You know, the Macs now have the notch and they've been able to push the screens out to the edges a little more. So it's kind of a win and a loss here. We're going to see how that works out with a lot of the applications that have a lot of long menus, right? There's obviously got to be some provision in the OS. Monterey, presumably, is going to ship on these machines because of the shipping dates. I'll get into that. But I think that for apps that have very long menus, I'm thinking, for example, like BB Edit, Photoshop, those kind of things, you know, there's got to be some kind of provision there for that notch, right? I don't know what it's going to be. Be interesting to find out. Hopefully, it's going to automatically happen for everybody. So we have the notch. It's got a 1080p camera in there, which I think, you know, a lot of people complaining. It's like, hey, what, not 4K? Why do you need a 4K video camera for video conferencing? I don't want to see anybody in 4K. I don't want people to see me in 4K. So, you know, I think that 1080p is fine for a video conferencing camera built in there. What I'm surprised at is the lack of Face ID. I certainly haven't found it referenced anywhere. Face ID on a Mac would be very helpful. However, we do have that touch sensor, which, as you know, I've always loved. Let's talk about that. So we've got the touch sensor on an actual key because we have a row of function keys. Interestingly, they have done away with the touch bar, which some of you are going to be like, yay, that thing was terrible. And others will be like, what? I just got used to it. But I guess they finally accepted most people really didn't care about the touch bar. And I'll be honest, I didn't have a problem with the touch bar, but I would rather have a row of function keys. So that's great. Thank you, Apple, for that. Next up, the ports. Now, on the 14-inch version, we have 3 USB-C ports. On the 16-inch version, we have 4. However, that's not the big news. The big news is MagSafe is back. I know. Everybody cheer. Believe me, I was like, that's it. That's the one thing right there, MagSafe. Thank goodness. MagSafe is back. And the other big thing for me, being a photographer, is, yes, we have an SD card slot come back. Interesting, right? So I think what's happened is Apple has realized, look, okay, we tried to force everybody to just do away with having any kind of ports other than USB-C on our machines, and we lost the battle, right? Because photographers, videographers, whatever, all those kind of folks are going to want an SD card slot. And I don't know about you, but I'm tired of plugging dongles in, right? So it's one less dongle. It's one that I use all the time. So I am so glad that we've got the SD card slot back. The machines themselves are actually slightly thicker as well. Part of that, though, I think, is you can see from the screenshots that there is a slightly raised base for the feet. And I think a lot of that has to do with ventilation, because they do have the M1 Pro, as they're calling it, and the M1 Max chips, which presumably need a bit more ventilation. And they say that by doing this, you know, the fans don't have to spin up so much. Fantastic. I'm all for that, because my M1 Mac Mini is silent. Never hear a peep from it. And I am very, very happy to hear that that's going to be probably the same deal on the MacBook Pros. Other things to note as we get into this here. On average, they're saying, you know, let's talk about the M1 Pro chip for now, right? Which is the 14-inch and the 16-inch version. And you get roughly double the performance that you do from the M1 chip. That's pretty huge, because As you all know, I love my M1 chip in my Mac Mini, and that performance is very good to begin with. So it's got to be staggering, is the only way I can describe it on these MacBook Pros. So that's great. The Pro Max chip, there is a difference. So first of all, let's talk about the Pro version of the chip. The Pros, of course, you can have, up to 10 cores, right? And then up to 16 cores. But more importantly, again, love to developers here at last, up to 32 gig of RAM. Yay. Now, if you get the M1 Max chip, though, you can go up to 32 cores and you can go up to 64 gig of RAM if you need it. I don't know. Personally, 64 gig is a lot, right? I have been 16 in my M1 Mac Mini and it's been fine for the most part. 32, very welcome. 64, I'm thinking you got to be like a serious videographer or like 3D artist, something like that. Something that's really like, I need all the RAM I can get. Now, they obviously quote lots of numbers and showed lots of fancy charts that didn't have numbers. So we're just going to not even bother with any of that because you can make a chart look as good as you want it to, right? One thing that they did say was, about the dedicated, about the GPU and, it's a, quote unquote, all this memory for GPU compared to a 16 gig chip in the old ones for the ATI cards and so on. Yes, okay, I get that. But the old ones were dedicated RAM. This is shared RAM. So it's not the same thing. And it's really, I think, a bit too far on the marketing spin from Apple to compare dedicated RAM to shared RAM, because shared RAM can go up and down all the time. But anyway, just a little thing there that I wanted to add to that, and kind of a, bit questionable in my opinion. But we do support up to the 2 external displays instead of the 1. Fantastic, right? Like I say, the GPUs and the cores, plenty of cores, plenty of bandwidth and everything else. You can do, they say, up to 20 streams of 4K res video playback. All right. Okay. If you need that, fantastic. But in general, it's fair to say that, these are amazing machines. If you have the M1 Max chip, you can actually support 4 external displays. And now, again, okay. I don't know that I know a lot of people have a lot of external displays. I've never had a need for 4, always had a need for 2, but never had a need for 4. That version, the Max chip, will do 7 streams of 8K ProRes. Again, I think that, a lot of this is aimed at the videographers and realizing that maybe Apple's accepting that, you know what, a lot of other platforms are catching us up here. So that's that. But in general, these machines are absolute powerhouses. And I'll be honest, I have ordered one. I've got the M1 Mac Mini that's getting traded in. I have opted to, and I really thought about this, I have gone for the 14-inch version instead of the 16 because I think, firstly, it's, nice and portable. And secondly, for the sake of the size of the screen, I'll just plug in external screens. That's fine with me. I'd rather have a more portable machine than the 16-inch version. And when you do the price comparisons, especially when you're pushing up the cores and everything else, I think it's that case of, if you need a 16, but honestly, these things are, from my experiences, at least with the M1 Mac Mini, if you give me more power, and you're giving me way more power in the 14-inch version already, that's more than enough for me as an Xcode user and developer and everything else, and a content producer. So I'm very happy with that. That'll do for me. You may prefer the 16. Hey, go for it, right? So that is basically what we got here. These 2 amazing machines. Price-wise, the prices are, very good, right? You're looking at about $3,500 sort of starting for the 16-inch and about $2,500 starting for the 14-inch. And they have the XDR displays. And I can tell you the display on they say, same display as the latest iPad Pros. Well, I've got one of those latest iPad Pros, and the display is truly, truly stunning, in my opinion. At first I thought, if you could put one of these displays on a Mac, you're in. And that's exactly what they did. So I've gone with the 14-inch version. Shipping times have already started to slip. Originally, you could get them next week. It's already slipping out into November. By the time this podcast comes out, it may even be further than that. I'm not surprised. A lot of people have been waiting for these machines, and I think we got everything that we could hope for, and maybe even a bit more. So it's going to be very interesting. Also next week, macOS Monterey comes out. Not surprised, really. I figured the final release for that would be whenever these new machines ship. So no surprise there. So that's an update here. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Reach out to me on the networks or at CompileSwift.com. You can find at CompileSwift on any of the networks. And like I say, reach out to me, CompileSwift.com. If this has been helpful, please, like, subscribe, leave a review. I really appreciate it. I truly appreciate everybody that's been leaving ratings for the podcast. It really means a lot to me. Thank you so much. With that, we'll leave it there. I'm sure a lot of you need to run away right now and order your new machines. I will see you in the next episode.